I converted to Christianity recently.
Awesome.
I started translating the Bible from Greek.
Whoa.
First because of class, and then I started doing it my own time.
Yeah.
So I started going to a Greek Orthodox church.
Good.
And so they put the church fathers and the Bible in the same general authority, right?
Yeah.
While Protestantism puts the Bible as the ultimate authority,
Yep,
right?
that's right.
I was wondering how you felt about that.
I feel that if you want to read the church fathers, you better read them. I have the utmost respect for Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, Clement, Bishop of Rome. I mean, the list goes on and on. But what they write is not on the level of Scripture. Well, how do you determine Scripture? 3 tests were used in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century. It was not the Council of Hippo Regius or the Council of Carthage in 394 and 397 that determined the New Testament canon. It was the eyewitness community, the church around the world. Now, what were the 3 tests they used to determine what's going to be part of the New Testament? 3 tests. First of all, was it written by an eyewitness or by someone who knew an eyewitness? Second point, did it hold to the Orthodox Christian faith? Gnosticism does not. Because Gnosticism teaches the God of Genesis 1 is evil because he creates matter. Matter's evil and the spirit is good. And that's a lie according to the Bible. What's the incarnation? What happens there? Jesus becomes a butterfly, right? Jesus becomes a power, right? No. Jesus becomes a human being with a body. What's the point of the resurrection? That Jesus had a spiritual resurrection? No. He had a bodily, physical resurrection. And in heaven, are we going to have new bodies? Yes, sir, we will. I'll be able to recognize your handsome face. You'll be able to recognize my ugly face, okay? But we will recognize each other, okay? Why? Because heaven will not just be the immaterial, the spiritual. It'll include the physical. And that's part of the reason why, guys, God says sex is a beautiful gift. I, God, thought it up. And it's to be enjoyed within the context of a lifelong commitment. That's marriage. And when you rip sex outside of that context, that is demeaning yourself. It is perverting your body. That's why you wait till you make a lifelong commitment to one person, and then within the context of that lifelong commitment, you enjoy each other's bodies sexually, which is good. It's a beautiful gift from God. So, the first test was the New Testament book written by an eyewitness? Secondly, did it hold to the Orthodox faith? And thirdly, the third test was, is it accepted by the worldwide church around the Mediterranean at that point? Egypt, Jerusalem, Antioch, Rome. And if it was not accepted by the worldwide church, like the Shepherd of Hermas, that's one, or the Didache, then it was excluded. So those 3 tests. It wasn't some Roman Catholic Pope or some council that made this decision. And it was no Protestant televangelist who made this decision. It was the worldwide church in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century.
And I feel like there can't be something more than likely when I've tried, and maybe my heart is closed off. I feel like that's what I've heard from some of my friends that are Christian, but I mean, I don't know.
No, I zero in on that word try. I have tried and tried and tried. That's religion. That is not the Christian faith. Religion is, I try harder to work to God. I need more evidence, I'm not living well enough. It's just my own personal issue, or it's God's, he's just not revealing himself to me. That's try, that's effort. That's emptying the cross of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ came and said, no, your trying and your efforts are never gonna be able to stack up. Jesus Christ says, all you need is need. You just need to say, I need you. I can't do this myself. I can't try anymore. And as soon as you do that in humility, now you're saying, I'm stepping out in faith. I trust you. Your life, your claims, your death and resurrection stack up to be pretty reliable. So I'm going to enter into this relationship. See, there's one big celebrity atheist we've debated a handful of times, and he always says, oh, I was an altar boy, I really studied. But I kept trying, and I had a serious. He was way more prideful, way more prideful than you. Don't worry. And he kept saying this, and I'm thinking, well, that's your problem right there. Stop trying so hard. It's God has worked his way fully to you. Now just take that step and saying, Christ, you did all the trying. You did all the ultimate ceasing finally on that cross, but you had to work hard. I mean, you were sweating teardrops of blood. Talk about trying to save us. That's trying. Now we just need to rest in what he did for us.
I have a friend in high school. He was in apologetics with me, He was a super Christian, went to church. I mean, probably knew more scripture than I did or the pastor. I just found out this year that he is an atheist. He's a transgender now. Now I was just asking you, can you lose your salvation, and if so, how?
No, I don't believe you can lose your salvation. When Jesus talks about, I never knew you, depart from me, he simply never knew you. Or in the Gospel of John, no one can pluck them out of the palm of my hand. So you can rest secure in who Jesus is, that he lived and died for you. And so you have security. See, whenever I meet a Christian who says, I have so much salvation anxiety, I don't know if I'm saved or not. Again, it gets back to, well, are you trying to be saved? Are you just trying? It's my own effort. No, say, God, please forgive me for my wrongs. I want to accept you, but I know it's your doing, it's not mine. And so no, you can't lose your salvation, but at the same time, we need to be careful not to judge people. I was sharing this with a group yesterday. We need to remove the plank in our own eye before talking to somebody who's transgender or living sexually different from what Christ calls us to live, and say, hey, I've done wrong. I'm still doing wrong all the time. I mean, why in the world are heterosexuals called out in the Bible over 360 times and homosexuals are only called out 6 times? Now, I better be looking at my own life and my own personal lusts and issue in that area than somebody else's.
I've been hearing you talk about like all that judging and stuff, and I think earlier you said there better be a judgment day.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, why is it there better be a judgment day and not there better be forgiveness? Because I think that, like,
forgiveness?
Yeah. As a Christian,
Yeah.
what is like you're wanting all this wrongdoing to be held accountable. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
But isn't it the power of Christ that he does forgive those things? So why is it that there should be a judgment rather than everything is forgiven?
You don't forgive me for giving you $1,000. You forgive me for doing something mean and horrible to you. You take an understanding of justice out of your worldview, you don't have the foggiest idea what forgiveness is. It's only people who have been hurt deeply who truly understand what forgiveness is. On the cross, God was hurt. Christ was hurt. Christ understands the cost of forgiveness. And if someone hurts you deeply enough, then you're going to have to decide, revenge or forgive them. And if you choose to forgive them, you begin to understand the high price of forgiveness. If anybody thinks forgiveness is free and easy, they've not been hurt badly enough and they don't know how costly it is to forgive.
Why isn't it just forgiveness across the board if he's already paid that?
Right. I look him in the face and say, I offer you forgiveness. He says, for what? I can stand here and offer him forgiveness all day long, but reconciliation will not occur until he says, I did wrong, Cliff. Would you find it in your heart to forgive me? Reconciliation will not occur until the wrongdoer acknowledges, I have done wrong, please forgive me.
Does that mean that there is work on our side that we have to do in order for us to be forgiven?
Absolutely. I need to respond to God's forgiveness, be melted by the fact that he has forgiven me and I don't deserve it. And then I've got to extend that same grace to him if he hurts me deeply and forgive him. That is not earning my way into God's good graces, but it's showing that my heart has been melted by the grace, the forgiveness of Christ. And now, in spite of what he's done to hurt me, I'm going to forgive him and not seek revenge.
I'm not saying that, like, from us, we should forgive across the board. I'm saying, why isn't that? Why isn't he doing it?
The reason that God cannot just blindly forgive is because he is the judge of the universe. When I sin against you, that's just a fellow human being. But when I sin against God, who gave both you and me life, that's of a different order. Little Johnny, kindergarten, kicked sand into Billy's face. Not good, Johnny. Little Billy's squirming and crying. Teacher comes out. Teacher says, Johnny, you should not have kicked sand into Billy's face. Johnny takes up a hand of sand and throws it into the teacher's face. Johnny, that was not a good move. Teacher hauls little Johnny into principal's office. Principal says, Johnny, what have you been doing? Johnny has a pocket full of sand, pulls it out, and throws it in the principal's face. Not good, Johnny. Things are getting worse. The police arrive. The police come in to the principal's office and say, Johnny, what are you doing? Johnny takes out a handful of sand and throws it in the police officer's face. Not a good decision, Johnny. Johnny grows up to be an older man. One day, the President of the United States is walking in front of him. Johnny reaches out to throw sand into the President's face. Not a good decision, Johnny. The penalty from the sandbox to the President of the United States is going to be different when it comes to throwing sand in someone's face. You throw sand in a god's face? Wow, not a smart move. He's the judge of the universe. He's committed to justice prevailing and winning. That's why a person needs to be punished. On the cross, Christ took the punishment that we deserve, thereby offering us the option of forgiveness if we choose it.
Every sin has like consequences to it. Considering like sexual immorality and like Christian couples, let's say they fall into that sin before marriage and the product is a child, and every life is a miracle. How would that, I'm just like curious on your thoughts, because there have been some pastors that say like that's God punishing you, but how can life be a punishment?
It could be God, in a way, teaching them things, but don't forget, punishment was mainly in the Old Testament. Punishment was. And just because the Israelites were punished, the Amalekites were punished, the Canaanites were punished, does not mean all those people groups or people are going to end up in hell. In no way does the Bible say that. It was probably temporal judgment, and they could be in heaven, many of them. We don't really know. But based off of the new covenant where Christ comes and takes on that punishment that we deserve, we're not walking around being fearful of punishment. So I would disagree with those pastors who are making this one-to-one correlation of saying, oh my gosh, you had a baby out of wedlock, God is punishing you, that's why you're going through all that you're going through.
So like me personally, I was baptized as a child, but like I'm now entering like that step and that walk with Christ. And then like for me to be truly saved, am I already saved since I was baptized as a child, or should I be baptized again?
Good question. If I were to stand out here and say, hey, just go get baptized and that'll save you, that puts salvation all on your shoulders. And it strips the cross away of its power. If Jesus saved you and said it's based off of his grace, well now if you're saying I'm saved by baptism, no, that's based off of me and what I've done. So ultimately it's an ego trip. We think we're making following this great command to do water baptism, and somehow that's going to get us to heaven. All right, I'm glad you're into, yes, focusing on commandments. That's very important. But to say that you need to do that to get to heaven, right, that's up to me. Falling right into religiosity.
How do you take that knowledge? Like, I think in the Greek it's epignosis, which is like head knowledge, and gnosko, which is heart knowledge.
Right.
And so how do you take that head knowledge from reading the Bible and turn that into heart knowledge? Turn that into something that strengthens your relationship with God.
Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. All right, Psalm chapter 1 talks about this tree of life. And it brings up the word meditation in the Hebrew multiple times. And so what is that saying? It's saying that meditation is the gateway to prayer. If you don't meditate, contemplate, and start asking yourself, if I took this scripture seriously, how would it change my life? Well, that's just a head thing. I'm just reading it formationally, informationally. But when you really read it formationally, now you're starting to ask the questions of your heart. Am I growing in being a more peaceful person, more loving person, more kind person, more humble, less lazy person? I need to ask myself that question all the time. Even though I feel like I'm working all the time, what areas am I lazy in? Spiritual laziness. So meditating, something called Lectio Divina, where you look at certain scriptures and you go over and over and over. Take 20 minutes to go over one verse and ask the questions. What is this saying? What would God's will be for my life based off of this verse? Who am I in light of this verse? Endless amounts of questions you can ask of that text, and that starts to get it into your heart. But you need to worship too. You need to stand in awe of God, because that pushes that knowledge from head down into heart.
My personal experience, I wasn't running away from God. I actively had turned to God after going through a part of my life where I was wicked. And I turned away from that for probably like 3 years. And I mean, I really, really searched. I went on a mission trip. I did all of that, all the time being unable to believe. And it was probably one of the most painful years of my life, because I was in the position where I was trying to give people something that I thought that I could never get, because I was searching so hard. And the more that I searched and the more that I tried to find evidence and tried to find God, I couldn't. And it was this feeling of believing in all of this, but not, like, I'm just a skeptic at heart. That's just like a part of my personality. And so I was in a position where I knew that I was going to hell, but there was nothing I could do about it. And that is one of the most painful things to believe. And it was so rough. And so over time, I mean, the more that I looked, I really got into like apologetics and searched, and over time I realized that this probably isn't true, especially for how hard I had been searching and for how long I had been searching. It just, like, why did God not do that for me if I was truly looking?
I've had periods, not a full year, of tremendous doubt. I've had times where I've had the Bible open and I've been out in my yard at 11 o'clock at night and felt like, oh, this is just a dusty old Aesop's Fables. What am I doing here? And that was during a period of depression for me. And so it was so painful. But at the same time, I relied more so on God's promises than my emotional struggle at that time. I don't know if you had emotional struggles during that time, but it's fascinating to hear you say, I kept searching and not finding. Because I would say that's more so up to you. When I'm listening to you and you saying also, I believe that I'm going to hell, I think you have an inner struggle there where, how do you know you haven't met God? How do you know God hasn't met you? Because just that struggle alone where you're deciding not to turn away from him, and that this is not the end. Because I also hear you sound like there's all of a sudden been this closing time where you've searched and it's over. But I think you have a lot more life to live. And I believe personally you're going to keep searching. I don't know that for sure. And that God will meet you in some kind of way. But don't forget, I don't think we need to set it up in such a way where it's, God, you have to meet me, I have to trust in you, I have to have this type of evidence in order to get to heaven. Versus, God, you have not given me this, and I believe and I know I'm just going to go to hell. See, I don't think you know for sure. I don't think anybody here can just condemn themselves and know for certain that they're going to hell, because that's too much so up to them. The cross of Christ is all about grace. It's about what Christ has done, rather than I've done horrible stuff, I don't believe in you, God, and I'm just going to hell.
Because I'm a skeptic at heart,
Yeah.
I literally couldn't get myself to believe in something like this. I desperately wanted to believe in it, and I would love to have that kind of belief, but it's just not in the cards for me because of the way that my brain works. And I've tried. I've been studying Christianity for like 7 years now, or more even. I'm gonna be a religion studies minor. And I mean, it's fascinating to me, but I really do search this out consistently, and it just never, if God is real and God made me like this, it feels like I was born with a hardened heart.
Why are you searching? If you had a hardened heart, you would say, God, get away from me. I'm not even going to ask the question, and I'm done with seeking after any evidence. I would just say continue with what you're doing, because everything I hear in your language is, it's over. Everything's done. I think it gets back to his question that he keeps asking people out here that I would love to hear from you. What is more reliable? What are you living for rather than God? Because I would like to know that, because potentially I would want that. And I'm not being, I'm not patronizing you in any kind of way right now. I'm being serious, because I have doubts. What can I live for? Is it just skepticism and agnosticism that I should live for all life long?
Well, I think that for each individual, there's something that you're drawn to that can give you purpose. It is harder to find that purpose without religion, and for some people, religion is super important, and it gets them through it. Religion does have a purpose.
But we're not religious. See, you're a religious major. We don't need some type of philosophy of religion to get through. We come to the Christian faith because it's true, not because it just works for us and makes us feel good. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, you believe that it's true.
I feel like it's opposite right now of what you're talking about with the evidence. Because I hope you rejected the Christian faith because you didn't see evidence for, say, the resurrection or reliability of the Gospels or that Jesus Christ really was God. Because what I just heard you say was religion is good. It works. No, we're not for religion. We would never go to a college campus and really try and just fit you guys into some type of philosophy box or religious box and say, here's some spiritual supplements. Go out there and just get it. We're not life coaches. We're actually saying the evidence is credible for Christ, for the reliability of the Gospels, and I think you have a God-shaped hole. As a therapist, everybody, even atheists, now say, you have a God-shaped hole. What are you going to fill it with?
I think everybody fills that hole with something different, with different religions, I guess. I guess everybody thinks that they're right in the way that you think that you're right.
And you do too, right?
I mean, I
Skeptics think that they're right.
I don't think that I can know for certain. I don't think that I can be right.
But that's knowing for certain. Saying that I cannot know for certain ever is a claim to truth that this is exactly right.
I could potentially know, but it would take a lot. It would take a lot for me. And I feel like there just hasn't been that sort of connection.
What would you like? What would you like in order to believe in God and Christ?
I think I'd need a personal experience. Those are the strongest. Those are what brings people into a religion, is personal experience. And for me, I searched for that personal experience for so long, and I mean, I tried so hard, and I just haven't had that.
Because you're up in your head so much, seeking, I have to have this personal experience. God, you have to show me this way, and God, I have to do this. There's a lot. I don't think you're struggling with pride necessarily. I don't think that's prideful, but I do think it's tremendously self-focused, and you're not going to meet God when you're saying, I have to have an experience, I have to have this much evidence, I have to have X, Y, and Z. It's no, God, I am surrendering myself, I'm giving up. See, this is why AA is so powerful. If you're gonna get over addiction, alcoholism, you have to give up your life. You have to say, no, it's not about me, it's not just looking inward. God, I have to give up myself. So this is just my last point where it's try and get out of your head. And how do you get out of your head? Start saying, God, thank you. Maybe you're not there, but thank you for my life. I struggle at times. Thank you for my family's life. Thank you for the beauty of today. Thank you for your omniscience. You're all powerful for actually creating this place. And see what begins to happen, because that gets your head down into your heart rather than just skepticism, agnosticism, what's going on? I'll never be able to figure it out, because ultimately that's going to be worshiping the search. And I would hate for you to worship the search all life long. That's going to cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration. And I think worshiping the search ultimately is a dead end, because there has to be real truth out there.
There are a lot of agnostics and atheists that really engage honestly with the question of God. And no matter what, they just sort of can't be convinced of his existence or anything like that. Like sort of the Sam Harrises, the Alex O'Connors, the Graham Hoppies, people like that. And I sort of wonder if it really is the case that they try so hard and they just can't be convinced of it. Where's the justice in the sense that they get sent to eternal damnation for that skepticism?
All right, well, I sat with Alex O'Connor. I think he's okay with me saying this. I sat with Alex O'Connor. I drove him to the train station after our time together. He flew all the way out from the UK to do a podcast with us in Connecticut, which was very kind of him. So I drive him down the street to the train station. We sit in my car for 15, 20 minutes. And I finally say, Alex, so what's it going to take for you to become a Christian? You know, I don't want a notch on my belt. I've never done that where it's like, oh, want another one. This is just for you and your own sake and you know, your own relationship with God and what you're going to do with Christ. And he sat there and waited for 10, 15 seconds. And then he said, a revelation. And he said it in kind of a deep, like almost sorrowful tone. Like he wasn't excited or happy at all in saying it.
And so I think right there it shows his struggle, and so many atheists and agnostics struggle with like, is this really, am I really holding the God of the universe who created this whole cosmos and me? Am I really going to hold him to the point of saying, unless you reveal yourself to me physically right here as a manifestation, the way I want it, then I will worship you and accept you? Is that fair? Like really, is that fair? Is not what he's given us in general revelation through the starry skies like Descartes talked about, and the beauty of above, the moral conscience within that Dostoevsky talked about, that Paul talked about. Is it not his word, the creativity and beauty of his word? Is it not the access of the Holy Spirit? Is it not the church and fellow believers and the beauty of what the Christian faith at large has done for, whether it's creating hospitals or abolishing slavery, and the beauty from within? Are all these things, you start to put them together, is that not enough evidence? Maybe it's not enough, but then you tell me what it is enough evidence. And one of them who said to me personally one-on-one, a revelation, I asked back, all right, well, what does that revelation look like? What does it have to be like? I don't know. So they start to move the goalposts. All right, well, you told me you need this type of evidence. Now I'm saying, okay, what specifically does it look like? And you say, I don't know. And now next year, you're gonna tell me Richard Dawkins, originally it was spell my name in the skies, Richard, I exist, believe in me. But now this year you're saying that wouldn't be enough because you'd say you were hallucinating. Moving the goalposts. So it's innate within every human being to want to wiggle out and say, God, I need more. God, I need more. So for the same reason that a criminal doesn't find the cops, the same reason for an atheist who doesn't find God. They're running away. Whether they realize that or not. I think everything, even, again, I'm not setting myself up as a moral superior, I can promise you. Because I run away just as much, even as a Christian now, as an atheist does in my mind. At times I hate God's moral law because I want to live my own way, to my own hedonistic type of pleasures. And yet God always calls me back to, are you sure? Are you sure you want to live that way? Because that leads to destruction so frequently.
I could say something along the lines of, God knows of my skepticism. He knows that I'm going to be skeptical in the sense that he's almost, I don't want to say misleading me, but he allows me to walk myself into damnation, knowing that I'm going to question his existence. And in a sense, that's not fair. I think that's what they would say in response to that.
And I would say, you better study Jesus Christ a little bit more. God is not walking us into damnation. I mean, how is Jesus Christ meeting people? John chapter 3, Nicodemus, a religious leader who would have been very far from him, a Jew, leader of the Sanhedrin, well, he comes and challenges him and says, you must be born again, and born again in such a way where your identity is found in something outside of just your pedigree as a leader in the Jewish ruling council. Then he comes to the woman in John chapter 4, though. She's an outcast, so not the in type like Nicodemus, religiously in. She's the outcast. She's a prostitute, basically. And he comes to her gently, kindly, graciously, meets her where she's at, but doesn't leave her where she's at. Still calls her out of her sin to a new type of life. And so is it that Jesus Christ? I mean, we could go on and on with case studies throughout the New Testament. I just think that they have Jesus wrong then. So if you're gonna give the God of the universe a fair shake, I hope you honestly read who he is in the Bible. Because that's not the Jesus that I read.
I guess, so I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
I don't believe God exists. I'd
Right.
also say I'm an agnostic atheist, so I don't believe because I don't think there's sufficient evidence. But let's for a second assume that there is a creator of the universe, and the creator is all-powerful and is all-knowledgeable, right? So can do anything that's not contradictory, for example, and knows what's going to happen, knows everything, right? How do you then go from that and show a skeptic how we can discern God's moral nature? How does all good follow from all-knowing and all-powerful?
It doesn't, you're right. Instead, I depend upon God to reveal God's character. I'm not smart enough to figure out God's character. I can't assume that God is good. You're absolutely right. That's where Jesus Christ comes into the picture. Jesus Christ claimed to be God, revealing his character. And he revealed that his character is loving, just, faithful, forgiving, gracious. You take Christ out of the picture and I'm up a creek without a paddle when it comes to explaining why I think God loves you and me.
Okay, if we assume that God is all-powerful and all-knowing, it would then follow that God has infinite power to deceive us. That is, God could very well be capable, and I don't think there's a way of knowing this, of saying, okay, we're going to put Jesus on earth, we're going to, teach you all these things that are going to seem good to you. Remember, you have the mind I created and I programmed the way I want. But actually, I've done the calculus, and this actually isn't the best world. These are just things I like for my amusement. How do we know we're not being deceived if God has all these capabilities that we can't even grasp in the first place?
It all comes back to Christ. Is he a reliable source of information about God, or is he not? And I think the evidence of his life, teachings, death, and resurrection is he's a reliable source of information about the character of God.
Okay. Let's assume, for example, that Jesus existed, did all the things that you mentioned, said all the things you said, rose from the dead, right? Why does it then follow that we ought to follow Jesus' actions? I get that Jesus did these things, and you probably have some sort of intuition that at least some of them were very positive. But, I mean, you rightly criticize people going like, oh, I'm doing this because I feel good. It's not a grounding for objective morality. So how do we go from Jesus said this message to we now ought to follow that message ourselves?
He's true. He's real. That's the best reason to follow Christ and to obey him, because the evidence is he's true and real.
My issue maybe this is where there's a bit of a disconnect. So I feel like when you're saying that Jesus is true, you're making more of a descriptive claim in the sense like this is the way the world was. Jesus existed. He did all those things, and for example, our records faithfully account that in the Bible and the Gospels, right? My issue, and this is like a philosophical thing that's been talked about for a while, is how do you go from a description of how something is or was to how something ought to be? That's my issue.
Does the historical evidence point to Jesus being real and reliable? I think it does. And then this Jesus says, God created us for a purpose, to love him and to love each other. And then he describes what this love is to look like.
When you say objective, maybe, what do you mean when you say objective morality versus subjective morality?
What I mean is, it is never good for you to abuse an innocent child. Never. Those are objective morals. It is never good for you to covet.
So what's wrong with saying something like this? I think for my moral system, right, and I think what happens is that we all have these very strong baseline intuitions on a very fundamental level. So for example, it's better to, take a nap than stab yourself with a rusty knife. Pretty much 100% of the human population is going to agree with that statement. So what I'd say morality is, and the reason why we have such strong primal intuitions, is because the instances of murder, rape, abuse, all this, violate these fundamental intuitions that we all share. The issue I have with that, though, is we can all arrive at kind of an agreement on certain positions, and it can function kind of like objective morality, but I don't know if there's any grounding to that initial intuition. And I also don't know if religion escapes that objection. That is, why do you have an intuition to trust God, for example? Or say Jesus says love is all important. How do you know that love is something we ought to value? You just say it's self-evident, but where is the grounding for that? Isn't that also just subjective?
We all have consciences. And it's phenomenal how much agreement there is between the human conscience in South America, in Asia, in North America, that the abuse of an innocent child is wrong. Are there exceptions? Yes, there are. Obviously, there are exceptions. But consistently, the abuse of an innocent child is wrong. Why? The human conscience seems to reel back and say that is wrong. Where does the human conscience come from? It doesn't come from matter and energy. It comes from a just God who gives us a conscience so that we can understand the difference between justice and injustice, right and wrong. As I look around the world, people innately have an ability to love. Where does love come from? It's far more plausible to believe that love comes from a personal God than it is to believe that love comes from matter and energy.
I feel like we're kind of back at the beginning, though, because you just said that it's a just God that has given consciousness, and this consciousness is able to tell us certain things about the world. But again, you're kind of presupposing that God is already just.
No, I'm asking the question, in light of the fact that we have a conscience,
Okay.
what is the most reasonable, the most plausible answer to the question, where does the human conscience come from?
I think that's a different question. Like, I don't have a fantastic answer to that. But even if we assume it's God that created consciousness, right? I don't think that solves the moral questions that we've been asking, right? Because how do we know our conscience is reliable? How do we know we ought to do what our conscience tells us? So people do what their conscience tells them, but how do we know that that's actually a good thing? What if it would actually be better if instead of going off our consciousness, we sit down and we go through a bunch of things and check it off and come to it that way? How do we know which method is better? And my issue is I don't think religion gets around that fundamental question.
Jesus Christ claims to be God, revealing moral truth, objective moral truth. Jesus says, you've heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that if a man lusts after a woman, he's committed adultery with her in his heart. Meaning by that, the heart of morality is the human heart. It's not just a rule, don't commit adultery. No, it's the human heart that says, okay, I'm going to view this woman as a human being, not as a hunk of meat on a hoof. So that is Jesus who defines that. And now the question is Jesus really the creator who gave us a conscience in the first place? And by exercising our consciences in a responsible way, can we understand what is good and what is evil?
Really appreciate your willingness to come here and engage in this dialogue. It's a lot. It's both informative and interesting. I guess the last kind of question here is how, for example, when we were given the 10 Commandments, right? How does God decide what those commandments are? Because the way I heard it phrased, right, is there's kind of two explanations. There is a sufficient reason that God can point to as to why these things are wrong, in which case that at the very least implies some sort of standard outside of God that an atheist could appeal to. Or B, it's just because God said so, which seems to be almost the definition of subjective, because being a creator does not automatically mean you are an arbiter of morality. They're not mutually exclusive, but one does not entail the other.
So the reason that we have the 10 Commandments is because God is communicating how to treat someone who has value. And of course, Jesus and the Bible insist he has innate value. Therefore, if I steal from him, if I lie to him, if I covet what he has, that is degrading him, that is sin. So the 10 Commandments are based on God is to be stood in awe of. Human beings have innate value because God created us for a purpose.
Yep.
And then God says, okay, now, because he has innate value, don't lie to him, don't murder him, don't seek to seduce his wife and commit adultery, don't covet what he has. Instead, celebrate him, love him, respect him. Don't use him.
So I guess, would you say then the external standard then or reason is the innate value of humans? So God is saying, because you are me, I value me, so you should value each other.
No, it's because I created him with innate value, and I created you, Cliff, with a free will. You better learn to respect the man, you better learn to love the man, and that's objectively true and real. It's not just a subjective feeling that you have, Cliff. It's objectively real. Purpose, that's what I created you for. You know, it's very similar to if I take off this wristwatch and use it to hammer a nail. What's wrong with that is it's a violation of the purpose of this wristwatch. This watch was not made to hammer nails. So this man and this man were not created to manipulate each other, to lie to each other, to abuse each other in any way. We were created for a purpose, and that is to love and respect each other as human beings created in the image of God.
I mean, I have some issues with that, but I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you.
Delight to talk with you. Thank you.
God created man in his image, right? And I see now that we can create these great, wonderful things that exist. Like, look at this campus. There's these huge buildings. Our most recent creation is AI, right? And I know it's really just a bunch of like linear math. But the further we push it, the more human-like it becomes. And I feel like at that point, I'm afraid that we're trying to push like our ability to create a human-like thing to its limit. and that's what God does. So I'm afraid that we're getting too close to that. Is there anywhere in the scripture or anything that Christ says that you can give me to help maybe like appease that fear?
Yeah.
Or to address the fear?
Nothing you should be fearing at all if you ever get tempted to think that we're going to be able to create a robot that has as much power as God. We're not anywhere near there, and we will never be close to that, I can promise you. We're having a tough enough time as it is to try and start life in the lab. And we'll never get to that point either, because it's a scientist who's trying to start that life, who, oh, by the way, has life, who was given life by our Creator. So this idea, whether it's a robot or a scientist in his nice little white coat in the lab, creating life or somehow having God-like abilities in the future, not even close. In our own human ego, that was shown most beautifully right out of Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, we try and get there and pretend like we're there, but we will never ultimately be there. We've seen failure upon failure over and over again to try and get there. Even Alexander the Great unfortunately failed, even though he thought he was going to win. Hitler failed, thought he was going to get there. So this, though, secondly, brings up a great point that gets back to our discussion, which is why human beings have value and robots don't. Because we have souls. Yes, we have value because we're relational, physical beings as well, but really God's about your soul, the self. When you speak about, hey, myself, hey, it's me, it's I, what are you talking about? If you're an atheist, then there's no soul, there's no immaterial, you're just talking about your body. So just say, it's just my body. There's no real innate me or soul or selfhood. There's no image of God in me, that's for sure. So you treat your body, you sleep around, get as many STDs as you'd like. If you want to do that, man, you go right ahead. You go right ahead and beat up that kid who's getting in your way, or that guy who's gonna get the job over you. He's just a body. He's no immortal soul. He's just a physical body who's gonna be here if he's lucky 70 years. That's it. So robots come in, and there's some nice machinery, they can do some nice stuff, but they'll never have souls. And we know one of the biggest pieces of evidence for there being a God is we know we're beyond just robots. We are not simply robots with flesh on us, right? We are beyond that. We have souls. We have bodies, but we're intricate, we're nuanced. We have spirits. We have minds beyond a brain. We have consciousness beyond a brain. We have rational thinking. We have free will. All of these immaterial things connecting us to a spiritual realm beyond just our physical makeup.
How is the concept of eternal suffering fair? Because, like, I don't know, that seems like the ultimate, well, like, I think a lot of the things in the Christian religion is good, and there's a lot of good teachings. That also seems like the ultimate, like, this is going to sound pretty negative, but it seems like the ultimate fear-mongering technique is to say, if you don't believe in our religion, you have eternal suffering, it's just going to be permanent, there's nothing you can do. So that kind of doesn't seem fair to me, that someone can suffer forever, like literally infinitely longer than your life on earth, you're going to suffer for it because you did something wrong, because you didn't accept Christ, even if you lived a good life, in a relative way, obviously, right? Because you're not going to have the exact morals that a Christian would. It's going to be more relative. But still, that is the part that I think I struggle with the most.
The fear of hell.
Yeah, the fear of hell and the idea that it's fair to punish someone for eternity. Like when someone, not that, our justice system is perfect, but when someone steals or someone kills, they go to jail for a finite amount of time. We don't say, okay, you're going to jail forever.
Or they get the death penalty.
Yeah, exactly.
That's more than finite.
That's true. but you know what I mean, though. Like, you know what I'm getting at. So just what's your response?
Okay, great. I think a lot of what you're getting on hell is probably coming from Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code. So don't listen to any of it. Look right inside what Jesus Christ talks about in that great book, the Bible. What he says in Luke chapter 16, the rich man and Lazarus. All right, the rich man is in hell. He is not in hell because of some fear tactic. Or nobody's in heaven because of some fear tactic. Now, oddly enough, it's an interesting thing that you bring up, though, because there are fire and brimstones that I believe hit this campus, right? And a lot of what they're preaching is turn or burn. So there's type of fear tactic in there. Well, I don't think all of that is horrible necessarily. Yeah, hell's a really bad place. It's okay to have a healthy fear of hell and evil. I think everybody should, right? To an extent. But the main thing is should not be, you're right, it should not be stick, stick, stick. No, heaven is primarily carrot in the sense of God is saying that I'm the ultimate of all goodness, love, and kindness. He's attracting us to him, and we want to share in that. But Luke chapter 16, I want you to read it tonight if you have time. I know you're probably a busy man. But Luke chapter 16, the rich man wants to be in hell even though he's suffering. He never says, get me out of here, Father Abraham. He doesn't want his relatives to come, But then what do we get? Well, they have the prophets and plenty enough evidence and desires either to come here or not. So you got to get that clear. This gets back to the justice and goodness of God. He's saying, if you want to be a rich man, so your whole identity is just in your money and wealth, well, then that's your God, and you end up apart from the source of all goodness, and it's wealth. Okay, where I'm from, 2 hours away, I can promise you, probably 90% of my town, their God is wealth. And that's why the divorce rate is so high. That's why there's so many open marriages. That's why there's so many kids who basically are abandoned, because so many dads and moms are living for the American dollar. So we see the consequences of if wealth is your God and how that becomes hell on earth and then hell eternally. If we understand what Jesus clearly talks about hell, then all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense that he's not the jealous boyfriend type, which is, hey, I'm coming after you no matter what. Even if you want to reject me and go to your own type of hell, I'm still coming after you. And you don't have any free will in the matter. That's the jealous boyfriend type, right? And eventually you're going to get a restraining order on that type. Instead, the loving type is not the jealous boyfriend type. It's, okay, you want to break up with me, I'm going to let you go your own way. That's loving you by giving you that free choice.
In Matthew, Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. But then later in that chapter, he says, do not assume that I have come for peace, for it is not peace. I will not bring peace, I will bring a sword. And then even in like my own interpretation of reading the Bible, like Ephesians 2:8, Jesus says, for it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not by yourselves, it is a gift of God.
Yeah.
For it is not by works, so we may not boast. But I think it's James 2:17, where it says, faith without works is dead, is death. So I guess my question is, like, how do we interpret, like as Christians, parts of the Bible that we seem are contradictory?
Excellent question. All right, so for 2,000 years, people have been working through biblical contradictions. But there's not been a huge contradiction that has ever been left unturned in a way where it hasn't been worked through. And so one of them is, I came to bring a sword. I came to turn brother against brother. All right, what is he saying? Well, he's saying there, it's right related to when he talks about, unless you hate your father and mother, you cannot be my disciple. Let the dead bury their own dead. I came to bring a sword to separate. Well, what he's talking about is radical discipleship, radical following of him, which is going to turn somebody away. I mean, if you grew up in a Hindu home or a Muslim home or atheistic home, if you come to know Christ, that's exactly what he's saying. He's bringing a sword in such a way where he's saying, there's going to be a radical departure from my old way of life to my new way of life of following him. Radical departure. So when he's saying, bring a sword, when he's saying, let the dead bury their own dead, when he's saying, unless you hate your parents, all right, he's coming and saying, love your enemies. Now he's saying, hate your parents? Contradiction? No, not at all. He's saying, pale in comparison to how much you love me, it'll look like hating your parents. But obviously the 10 Commandments is honor your father and mother, one of the top 10 commandments. So he's not contradicting himself. So you got to look within, again, gets back to paradox, gets back to parables. How is he speaking? What's the context? Crucial interpretation.
Right now, it seems like a lot of the argument is basically revolving around, can we be moral people independent of a belief in Christian theology? And can we frame morality in more secular terms? So basically, I'm kind of curious, given this hypothetical character who, to me at least, seems intuitively plausible, how could you then make the case that Christianity is an imperative, something that everybody should adopt, instead of just a flavor, a choice, a way of approaching morality?
One of the pieces of evidence for God is that he is outside of space and time, and just like there's creative mathematical laws, there's also creative moral laws, which are outside of space and time, saying that you should always treat this woman with respect and dignity. Not just when you feel like it, not just when your culture says to, not just when the powerful says to, but you should always, because there's a law above the law of objective morality. So I'm not saying, yeah, let's just all be truth seekers and just decide to become Christian because the Christian theology is great. No, you can be a different type of ethical system. I don't think you could be as great as Christianity because Jesus Christ did say love your enemy, and no ethical system went that far. So in that sense, maybe. But no, I bring any ethical system. I want more good people here.
Yeah. But can you have that within you independent of being Christian? Like
you cannot have that in you independent of having some type of connection to being created in God's image. No, it's because God has created you in his image. You're more than just a moist robot. You're more than just dancing to your own DNA.
I agree.
You're more than just determined by your parents' genes. You have influence from all those, but you're not determined by them.
I might be mistaken in making this point, but it seems like whenever somebody acts like morally, in a morally righteous way, you say that's Christian morality, right? But my understanding of morality is that it exists independently of Christian morality. I mean, morality has existed from before Christianity even existed.
Yep.
And so basically, like, I'm not sure if I'm like quite making sense, but
Oh, you
it
are.
seems like
Yeah.
here you're trying to promote Christianity, but would you say your first and foremost mission is like promoting ethical behavior, or like would you actually just prefer if everybody was Christian specifically?
No, I don't want you to just be a Christian just because it's nice ethics and because Christianity helps you to look at yourself better. No, I want you to become Christian in the sense of knowing Christ and accepting him as your personal savior and closest friend and worshiping him rather than any created thing, and then having eternal life with him based off of that relationship. Not a proponent of utilitarian ethics, not a proponent of Oprah's ethics or Tony Robbins or any type of life coach. No, that's not me. I got friends who do that. That's just not me. That's not how I tick. And that, God bless them, that's great. But no, that's not what I'm talking about at all. There was morality before Christianity, you're exactly right. And I believe that came from the Judeo-Christian God. Now, through Jesus Christ, what he taught is what Robert Coles, one of the top Harvard professors, said, that all ethical teachings are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount in the Bible. Simply footnotes. That's Robert Coles at Harvard. He said that. So, there were good people before any Christian teachings, but Christ came and taught as one with authority. What does that mean? It means somebody who taught a new type of goodness, rights, wrong, character that nobody had ever heard of before. That's why all the rabbis were shocked. They were like, what is this new thinking? Turn the other cheek, love your enemy, sacrifice for the hurting, human rights. None of this makes any sense. An unconditionally loving God, that was a huge one. That had never been in existence before. So many of these things were new. But you're right, in terms of a moral understanding, no, I believe all humans are created in God's image. So we had moral understanding before Christianity, even Christ came on the scene.